Absolutely. And one of the reasons I have you on here is because you have such a breadth of work experience. Not only have you done like the Disney licenses for Boom Studios, you work for other smaller publishers out there. You've actually written some screenplays and animation shows and stuff that have been up on stuff like Max, but you also started your career at Tokyo Pop, basically adapting manga to English translations for the Western market, which is going to appeal or be pertinent to the very first topic we're going to talk about, Aaron.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I started out as a copy editor there, and then as I was copy editing, I was giving notes on like the sentence structure. It wasn't just like going through. Most people would just go through it and they'd be like, "This spelling's wrong, this grammar's wrong." But I was going through and I was giving notes on like sentence structure and like you could restructure this way so it sounds more natural in English coming from Japanese, and the editors really liked that, and so I ended up doing a lot of adaptations myself.
Manga has been selling incredibly well in the West within the last few years. Titles such as Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, and My Hero Academia all appeared on bestseller lists with impressive regularity. As Publishers Weekly cited, manga sales accounted for almost 45% of all comic books sold in 2022. Manga sales also outpaced the once dominant children's comics and helped revive comic sales in 2022. Publishers Weekly also credited the surge of interest in manga to anime's unstoppable mainstream popularity. For comparison's sake, and as per Business Insider, comic sales in 2021 hit a record-breaking sale of $2.075 billion, with manga accounting for $1.47 billion in total.
Well, now we all know why American comic journalists are so hot to include manga in the sales numbers, as they continue to claim that there's nothing wrong with the Western comic book industry. It's all fine, and all we need to do to make it look good is to stitch manga sales into there and claim them as our own, and the industry looks great.
And this article that I'm going to talk about here actually names 4 reasons why they believe manga is absolutely destroying American comic books. But starting up, they talk about the price. Manga may have come out as the victor of manga versus comics because of prices and shopping venues. It's simply more budget friendly to get into manga than comics, especially when comparing the book's page count of product to the sticker price. Single comics issues, which are around 22 pages long, may seem cheap since they cost around $5 per issue. Graphic novels or collections that have 100 pages at the very least can go for as low as $10 depending on the title.
Wait.
However,
stop. I'm sorry. We got to clip that out. I got assaulted by a bug.
It's super easy. What are you doing, Aaron?
I'm so sorry.
As if the people don't want to see you being harassed by a fly.
Dude, it came right at me. And I just like went.
I'm leaving it in. It doesn't matter.
Don't do it. I'll be so upset.
Graphic novels or collections that have 100 pages at the very least can go for as low as $10 depending on the title. However, a typical manga volume has around 160 to 180 pages for around $10, and there's no denying that you get much better bang for your buck, and the value proposition of manga certainly eclipses comic books basically across the board.
If you're a kid and you have a certain amount of money, what are you gonna invest in? You're gonna get so much more story for $9.99 from a manga than you are paying $7.99 for a Batman book that isn't even going to be that good.
Well, I think Batman's between $5 and $6, unless you get to the Brave and the Bold anthology book, and yes, it's $8.
Or unless it's a special issue for some reason that they thought they could charge $8 for.
Yeah, I think the upcoming Mark Russell Batman story is going to be $8 an issue. Special, right? Special ed.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I wouldn't pay you $5 for a Mark Russell Batman comic. I don't know how they think they're going to get $8.
And the other thing about the price, if you just want to get the physical collections, it's so much cheaper and value friendly to go with manga. But also if you're a digital reader, to get like the DC like Universe app, which isn't even their entire library, I think it's at a minimum $7 a month and goes up to $10. And I think they might even have a higher tier than that. If you get Shonen Jump, $3 a month, unlimited access to every single manga they've ever produced.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that could be considered a loss leader. They're not making as much money on the app, but it does get people invested. It gets people checking it out, and then they go out and they actually purchase the physical copies.
Well, and they're also able to advertise you when new volumes have come out. Oh, you like to read My Hero Academia? That's releasing on Tuesday, and you'll get a little reminder from the app itself.
Yeah, and this is a market that Marvel and DC long ago abandoned. Instead of developing their own apps and really making those strong, they gave it to the morons at Comixology. They just handed off their business to somebody else instead of doing it themselves, instead of investing in it themselves and having control over it. Then Amazon bought Comixology, and then it got even worse, and then it eventually went away. So all that digital content that you paid for, good job. It's just one of those things. Don't buy digital, buy physical media. Shonen Jump is a great app to get in, to read a bunch of manga and see what you actually want to own physically. But then you should go out and you should buy it physically because, as we see from Comixology, as we see from the PlayStation Network, as we see from all these digital libraries, you are just leasing. You do not own anything. So, go and get physical media.
They also talk about the accessibility issue with comic books versus manga. Comic shops heavily cater to readers who are already deeply invested in comics' robust but relatively narrow culture. Comic book movies' pop culture dominance has done little to change or improve the perception that comics were generally male-dominated in juvenile space. Manga volumes are usually sold as paperback or hardback books, and they nearly always appear in mainstream bookstores such as Barnes & Noble. Such locations are open and more welcoming to any book lover, not just comic book fans who are already part of a certain fandom. This gives Japanese manga far more visibility for shoppers and potential newcomers, and this helps minimize manga's geeky aura.
That sounds like a slur.
I feel like they're bashing us on that one, doesn't it?
I feel like they are. Yeah. No, I don't think. Look, I mean, I don't. I go to the bookstore a lot, and I always check out the manga section, and just by presence of me being there, it's much cooler.
That is one of the things that Marvel and DC were a bit narrow-sighted. Once they decided to go all in on the direct market, and you stop seeing them at newsstands, you stop seeing them on spinner racks, there became an enormous accessibility issue, which admittedly Marvel Comics decided that they needed to address about 10 years ago. They just thought their accessibility issue was that their heroes were predominantly white and male. And they're like, well, if we make them more diverse, they'll be more accessible, not realizing that the real accessibility issue is they just aren't widely available, which manga certainly is.
And the worse stories that you've put out, the harder you've made them to sell, which means that retailers that were dependent upon good product have gone out of business, increasing the accessibility problems. So it's everything with American comics is reactionary. It's there's no forward thinking whatsoever. It's always we've done business like this for years, and so we'll just stay the course, and there's absolutely no innovation, and that's exactly what you're seeing. While the Japanese continue to innovate, and while manga continues to find new avenues to get out to people, Western comics just stick with the same old, and but the problem is the quality of the stories and the quality of the characters and the quality of the art is not same old. It's getting worse. So your sales are getting worse. Comic shops are going away. You're losing your avenue to reach people.
And I do think they miss another point here when it comes to digital, that, in a lot of ways, your phone or your tablet really could be the new spinner rack, that new entry point. You always have an enormous access to all the mangas that's out there to remind you just how cool it is, where you don't really get that with DC and Marvel.
No, not at all. And, you have to pay the same price for a digital copy of a American superhero comic that you would for a physical, physical volume. So why would you ever do that? I know that, because one guy, Brian Hibbs, lost his mind about it back in the day. We all had to pay full price for digital comics because he thought it would hurt the sales in his store. Manga is the example that shows you that that's not true. It's a loss leader. Yeah, there's some people that will never come and buy a physical copy, but there's people that are never going to buy a physical copy anyway, and those are the people that are going to be on the app. Right now, you have a ton of people who are reading comics who are never going to buy a physical copy. They like to complain about it. They like to assert their will. They like to demand their ships, but they're out there on the pirate sites getting their comics. So you're never going to convert those people to sales anyway. But by having a cheaper app, or by having an option where you can buy a digital copy cheaper and read it and see if you like it, there is a huge market of people that will then go buy a physical copy. They will want to own it physically, especially if they know the fact that, they understand the fact that at any point their digital library can be taken away. Absolutely.
The next thing they identified that manga is doing better than comics is the point of entry. Any manga series has one straightforward story, and the volumes go in order and beyond. Example, volume 1 is followed by volume 2, 3, and so forth. This makes manga more similar to serialized novels that are meant to be read in order. On the other hand, comics tend to be all over the place, even if comic publishers make an effort to provide clear entry points and detailed guides for their countless rebooted universes, alternate universes, and new storylines. It can still be too daunting and overwhelming for potential newcomers to even start. Manga doesn't suffer from a confusing, decades-old web of interconnected stories, endless retcons, and alternate continuities to sort through. And I can absolutely attest to this because I did start reading comic books a little later in life. I was in my 30s when that happened. And I do remember the first time I went into Heroes and Fantasies in San Antonio, Texas, and I was looking at the wall, and I knew I wanted a Batman comic book. I wanted one specifically, but there were like 6 different titles all next to each other, and I couldn't, from the cover, figure out which one I was supposed to be actually buying. And I was so frustrated by the experience, I just walked out and didn't buy anything, at least the first time.
And that happens a lot. If you're a parent and you take your kid to see a Marvel movie, I mean, I know that they don't really do that anymore, but a couple of years ago, that was a big thing to do. And so, you take your kid in and they're like, oh, they really loved Avengers. Let's go to the comic shop. Let's get an Avengers book. Not only do you have to navigate all of the ridiculous variant cover and relaunch and renumbering schemes, but you have to then figure out what, wait, the team that we saw on the movie screen isn't the team that's represented in the comics, because the comic companies have no synergy with the movies whatsoever. The movies have no synergy with the comics. The movies aren't even interested in pointing you to the comic book shop. The fact that you have Marvel movies out there and that they were huge at one time, and that when you showed up on opening weekend, they didn't have a free comic for you with information on how you could get into the comic books is absolutely ridiculous. And it always would, you'd always get that, the movie's coming out, so the comics are all promoting the movie, but it never went the other way. The movies didn't need help, although now they do, but they didn't need help at the time. The comics did. And the movie, there's no, for a company like Disney, that used to be all about synergy and all about maximizing, across their different product lines. It was a huge missed opportunity, and comics continues to suffer because of it.
And if you make a new Batman fan from the animated series, or maybe like the Batman movie or whatever the Chris Nolan did, we did a video on YouTube, on the channel, where to start at DC Comics. We had to come up with 5 places to start, because there is no one place. You can start in the Golden Age. Maybe you want to jump to the Silver Age. Maybe you want to jump to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Maybe you want to jump to this moment in time, or DC Rebirth. There's no linear Batman story. There's no linear Superman story. There's no linear story for any of these characters. Whereas if you watch the anime of My Hero Academia and you go buy My Hero Academia Volume 1, you know exactly where to go next. Whereas if you're a fan of these heroes, like just in a couple of weeks, if you're reading Batman, you're going to start reading Joker Year 1, telling the origin of Joker 80 years after the character was introduced the first time. That doesn't cause confusion whatsoever.
And, here's the other thing is, you're going to read that Joker Year 1. It's probably not going to be very good or very satisfying. And in 2-3 years, it's going to get retconned by another writer anyway. So what's the point of investing in anything?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with this point of entry that you really don't know where to start. If you're a new fan, if you just discovered these heroes, and Marvel and DC have made it almost impossible to just jump in there and really get going. The last thing that they note, that manga is doing better than comic books, more genres. Manga may also be selling better than comics because of their more accessible content. Comics appealed greatly to superhero enthusiasts and fans of gritty, hyper-masculine deconstructions of their former. It's not hard to see comics as a juvenile art form and hobby mainly made for men by men. Conversely, anyone could fall in love with the more down-to-earth stories found in slice of life, romance, and comedy manga series. Manga has plenty of action series too, but manga as a whole simply has more variety. This, unsurprisingly, attracts far more readers, especially younger ones.
The difference with manga isn't that, superheroes are all hyper masculine and are all written for men by men. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a market of that's just for men. It's okay for men to have things that are theirs. The problem is that all of these ideas have started to be forced into the regular books that used to be for men, and now men are walking away, and there's no new audience to replace the men that you've run off. So with manga, if you want to read about someone who's trying to become a chef, there's a manga for that. You want to read a manga about soccer because you like soccer, there's a manga for that. But they're all divided up. They're not trying to force the soccer into every other book. They're not trying to force the cooking into every other book. These slice of life stories are slice of life stories that appeal to those readers. They know who their markets are, and they know who they're marketing to, and they know what the relative numbers of people that they're going to draw are based on that. American comics have no idea. They think that, we hear from guys like Tim Sheridan that, there's this huge, huge audience of LGBT readers that can't wait to jump in on superhero stuff. And that doesn't prove true. You can keep trying it, but it doesn't prove true. What you have to do if you want to cultivate that audience, or if you want to reach an audience that exists, which there's no evidence that it does, but if you do want to reach that audience, what you do is you make the mainstream audience as healthy and as robust as possible. You appeal right down the middle to the people that actually like comics. Comics are not for everybody. Comics can be for anybody, but those people have to like comics.
Absolutely. So I do think they made some valid points, but there's one thing we cannot deny, Aaron Sparrow. Manga are beating the absolute shit out of American comic books. There's no denying it at this point.
No, you're absolutely right, Wes. Manga is absolutely pulling the pants down of American comics and paddling its ass, which I think you can read about in the new Tim Sheridan Green Lantern.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of ass pedaling going on that comic book. Now, Aaron, you and I, we are not finished here. In fact, we got another hour and 40 in us because this is the Geek Fix podcast exclusive to the Patreon. Obviously, the first subject always goes up on the YouTubes. And this next week, we're going to have something special where we're going to have polls on the Patreon. The backers for the Aaron Sparrow tier are going to be choosing what we're going to review next week. We're going to do a special Patreon's Choice review session. Do you want us to review Echo? Do you want us to review the second movie of Blade? All that kind of stuff. And we're going to have a lot of fun, Aaron.
We're putting a lot of power in your hands. Please be merciful. Don't make us watch Echo. But no, there's going to be some good choices up there, and you guys will get to choose whether you want to be benevolent or whether you want to put us through hell. So it's still in here, like the fly's like buzzing around, and it's trying to get in here. It's trying to become YouTube famous.